Those who live in stable societies find it hard to imagine how normal, decent people could have staffed the Nazi death camps, the Gulag, Mao's Red Guards, or the dark interior of Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. But every one of those cases had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of eager volunteers. And they were all normal, decent people in previously stable societies. So it could obviously happen among us just as easily. The first thing to understand is that every one of those extremist groups regarded themselves as a moral movement rebelling against a corrupt and privileged elite that oppressed them. They were sure they were victims, noble heroes battling to free their people from the greedy and malevolent forces that exploited and subjugated them. They thus have a lot in common with the people who believe themselves to be most opposed to and furthest removed from Nazis today. The people who don't understand this phenomenon are already halfway there. And we can look at a couple of recent cases to help us understand how the potential enablers of tyrants already walk among us. Just like all the others, they regard themselves as the most moral of us, the activists who will save us from evil. And they have to believe that. Otherwise, they could not commit the vile acts they do against people who they regard as so evil that they deserve the brutal treatment inflicted on them. And we saw an expression of this when Donald Trump came to visit the UK. Many people dislike Trump, and it's easy enough to see why. But that's not enough. They have to regard him as evil, and they have to believe everyone who supports him is evil too. It's how they feel good about themselves. It's easy virtue. It's difficult to do something positive in the world, but it's simplicity itself to sit in judgment on others and to feel virtuous in comparison. So when Trump came to Britain, crowds swarmed into the streets to do just that. But at least 2 people came out to support the American president. Brave souls, both old men. And the Trump haters proved their moral superiority when hundreds of them swarmed after these elderly gentlemen, screamed hate at them, attacked them, threw milkshakes over them, and bundled them to the ground. Because that's what nice people do. Right? Let's look at what happened.
Trump's not welcome here! Trump's not welcome here! Off our streets! 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 Nazi scum! 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 Nazi! I'm here to stay. I'm not welcome. Fuck off! You're behaving as badly as he is.
Yeah, you're just as bad as him, guys. This is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. How can you behave like that to somebody?
You're inciting. It doesn't matter. You do not shout.
I don't need to hear from other white men. Thank you very much.
Now, let's take a step back from this and look at it objectively. There's little to distinguish between this furious crowd turning on 2 helpless old men and the mobs who attacked Jews in early Nazi Germany. And Gina Carano was quite correct to point this out. You have to wonder what these people would be capable of had our history taken a different turn? I can tell you, they would be capable of anything. They would be capable of horrors. There are some parallels between the squat blonde lady we just saw and a woman we looked at in another video. She joined a mob of hundreds who closed an art gallery and rounded on the only person who calmly tried to argue for artistic freedom and reasoned discussion. But these people don't want civil discourse. They just want to bully people, scream hate at them, and get them to shut up. They also, quite clearly, want to hurt them. Let's be honest about this. These two women would be in the Gestapo without a second's hesitation. They wouldn't need to be paid or coerced. They've already volunteered. They're doing it for free. They're doing it of their own volition. They're doing it with callous brutality. And they're doing it because they enjoy it. They've already crossed the line. Now, Siobhan Progent, the woman in the video we just saw, worked for the NHS. I believe she was a sort of nurse. Well, there were plenty of doctors at Auschwitz too. The irony is, these people claim to be opposing Nazis, but that's because they really don't know anything about them. Ask these women for their opinions on Gregor Strasser, Julius Streicher, or Rudolf Hoss, and I suspect you'll get blank looks. Because that's how it works. You take people who don't have deep historical or political knowledge, you give them easy answers that allow them to project all their hate, loathing and impotence onto other people. You tell them the helpless targets in front of them are vile, racist oppressors, and you let them off the leash. That's how people follow. But what about those who lead? Well, this brings us to Jeremy Corbyn. Lots of people like Corbyn. He can seem, superficially, like a nice guy. He has gentle mannerisms, and he frequently voices reasonable sounding, moderate and compassionate opinions. And I'm sure he considers himself a decent sort too. He's widely regarded as a principled, decent and sensitive soul. Nothing like Stalin or Pol Pot. But is he? Let's look at his principles first. Now, a man who's principled would be consistent. He would treat people the same if they behaved the same. But does Corbyn? Let's imagine that a Tory MP, say Boris Johnson, overthrew his political opponents in a violent coup. Imagine he established a dictatorship that lasted for 70 years, murdered 25,000 political opponents, banned all rival political parties and outlawed elections. Picture him crushing personal liberties and freedom of the press, imprisoning homosexuals and feminists in medieval conditions, and appropriating the villas and yachts of the wealthy. How do you suppose Corbyn would regard him? He'd almost certainly regard him as one of the worst tyrants in history, and he would loudly condemn his every action. So a principled man would regard anyone who behaved like that as a tyrant. Except when Fidel Castro did all of those things, Corbyn called him a champion of social justice. Now, he doesn't call the Boris we have now a champion of social justice, never mind the dictatorial, tyrannical Boris I've just described. So Corbyn is in reality among the least principled of people you could meet. He's not moral at all. He's partisan. Let's not forget, this is a man who claims to care about the gay community, who champions women's rights, and who has been a lifelong opponent of racism and an advocate of peace. Yet he's also spent decades fawning over the worst racists, homophobic and misogynistic warmongers on the planet. And when these allies of his commit atrocities, he makes excuses for them all the time. He justifies it. He brushes it off. He condones it. But if he forgives and excuses murder when it's committed by such individuals, then he'll certainly do the same were it, in certain circumstances, committed by his friends. And there's little difference between excusing it and enacting it, because he's already taken that step in his mind. Corbyn absolutely has the makings of a Stalin or a Pol Pot, and don't be deceived by his gentle mannerisms. Pol Pot was famous for his winning smile and easygoing nature too. When Che Sim met him, at the height of Khmer Rouge rule, he recalled that he did not seem to us to be a killer. He seemed kindly. He did not speak very much. He just smiled and smiled. And his words were light, not strong. In general, you would estimate that Pol Pot was a kindly person. Simple, with a mass view. That is, a view of the common people. A sort of for the many, not the few approach. Even when interviewed in 1997, decades after the horror had finished, Pol Pot still radiated that same calm air. He still beamed that smile, and he seemed at peace. He told Nate Thayer, the American journalist who interviewed him, "Even now, and you can look at me, am I a savage person? My conscience is clear." Do not be misled. It's always those most sure of their moral purity who commit the vilest acts. And as with Pol Pot, their consciences remain untroubled. The tigers are all around us. You can be sure. Let's not give them the opportunity to unsheathe their claws. If you've enjoyed this film, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in these topics, I've written 2 books which go into them in extensive detail. They're called The Tyranny of the Left, and they're available on the links below. Please feel free to pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.